You're at your old trusty boat. You call mighty Sparrow. I'm in the city of Mardi Gras.
Welcome to the Sailing into Oblivion podcast, where we hear stories from everyday people who do extraordinary things. I'm your host, Jerome Rand. Okay, here we go. So today's show is going to be a little different as compared to some of the last shows because I'm having trouble getting people to sit down with me and chat about sailing or anything they want to. So a little bit of a surprise, but I keep harping on a few people, and hopefully I will get them in to do some more interesting interviews and stuff like that. But I figure in the meantime, I might as well talk about a subject that's going to be coming up really shortly here, and that is the trip up to Maine. So always about this time of year, it's getting to be just about the perfect time to head north and get back up to a little cooler temperatures. Down here in South Carolina, been, peaking into the mid 80s. It's really cold right now for some reason. Last night, winds shifted to the north, and I think it got down into the 50s. So a few of the extra blankets and things like that I stowed away thinking it was always going to be hot again down here, had to come out. So that was interesting. But it was a nice night's sleep. The wind sort of howling through the rigging and everything. I don't know. Sometimes I kind of enjoy that. I try not to forget that it's kind of a cool experience. In a lot of ways, I find it very similar to camping, being out in the woods and having, the wind cutting through the trees and all that. I don't know. There's just something about that white noise that I really enjoy. Maybe it just sort of sets in motion the knowledge that I'm out in the elements and wouldn't need any sort of sound making machine or anything like that. I don't know. For some reason I like that. I'm weird. What can I say? But so today what I was going to do is just go through sort of my checklist and all the things that I have to do when I'm sort of preparing for this next little voyage. And, obviously I say little voyage, it's 1,100 miles, something like that. And because I'm solo, I go offshore, stay out of the traffic. So I'm not doing any stops along the way. And the pros and cons with that really, the pro is that you get up there faster. The con is that if bad weather comes in, there's not a whole lot I can do but just ride it out. And one of the reasons for setting off at the end of May or in June is most of those big systems that are coming down from Canada, sweeping across the states, and then turning into low pressure systems as they leave Cape Hatteras, the frequency slows way down. Now, in May, you can get pretty horrific conditions out there, but they're just less and less frequent. And typically what I look for is a system going off that will then be sort of followed by a bit of a high pressure system, get the winds coming out of the south and try and ride that. I look for primarily a good 3 or 4 day window so that I can get north of the Gulf Stream, because I can hook into that after about a day and then I'm cruising north, and before I know it, I'm north of Cape Hatteras, and whatever happens after that is whatever happens. But for me, the scary part is the Gulf Stream off of Cape Hatteras and to the north of that, because I've been surprised out there a few times and it gets really uncomfortable. And with the weather changing as quickly as it can, you sort of are always looking over your shoulder, wondering what the heck's going to happen. So that's my game plan. And then typically once you get out of there, 3 or 4 days in, you're getting into more of a safety zone, headed towards Cape Cod, Georges Bank, and then into the Gulf of Maine. Last year, I was able to do that trip in 9 days with a buddy of mine, and perfect weather, strong southerly for the first bunch of days. We only ran into northerly winds, I think, once near George's Bank, and that only lasted for 12 hours, and then it died off, and we sort of motor sailed the rest of the way. So that was probably a record trip. I think the year, anything I did before that, we're talking 12 to 14 days, but usually that was from the Caribbean. So in any event, like I kind of always do, it all starts out with just a notebook and a pen, and I just start jotting down everything that needs to be inspected, replaced, replenished, all that sort of stuff. So just going down this list, the first thing I have on there is sails. And, obviously sails need to be inspected. So as soon as I get a nice, lovely day, I will pile up the 10 or 11 sails that I have, throw them in a cart, go up to the grassy knoll and whip them all out and check them. Any of them that have little tiny holes or any areas with chafe and stuff like that, I'll fix those. If I have to, the old Sailrite sewing machine will come out, and then I'll be diligently doing repairs. But typically for me, what I like to have on board in good condition, 2 mainsails, 2 big head sails, 2 staysails, and then the storm jibs. I have 2 of those, different sized ones and different weights. One's really heavy duty, and then one's not so heavy duty, but it's a little smaller, which I don't know. It's kind of strange. I would have liked it to be the other way around, so that when all hell breaks loose, I can put one up there that's crazy strong and crazy small. But that's sort of the sail plans that I like to have. And the one thing that I'm missing, well, actually there's 2. So my spinnaker, that's toast. That completely disintegrated on the trip around the Atlantic. But the big drifter, that's the one I really am going to be missing. I've got a pretty decent size, sort of heavyweight drifter, but I had this gigantic one, and it was perfect when the winds went down below into like 5 or 4 knot range. I could still somehow get Sparrow to just ghost along, and that was pretty amazing. It was sorely missed. That one got destroyed in the doldrums back in 2018, and I have yet to be able to find a replacement. It was a used sail that I bought, but in any event, so the sails, that's a big one. I just want to make sure they're all good, and I know that most of them are, but it's always good to take a good, thorough look. And a lot of the stuff that I'm doing over the next couple of weeks really is done primarily because I could still fix this stuff when I'm out at sea, but it's always way more difficult, takes a lot more time, and it's typically just not what you want to really be doing when you're out there. I mean, I want to be cranking back, reading books, listening to music, watching the waves go by. I don't want to be sweating it out down below, moving and pulling sails out, and the sewing machine when you're underway, it's not that fun to deal with. It's much easier to do these things on land. So all the sails come out, they get all sorted out. And with that, I do a nice thorough check over the mast. So basically climb on up to the top and check every little fitting, make sure there isn't anything coming loose or chafing or anything like that. And I, periodically through this winter, I've done that as well. But Sparrow's been a sleeping giant, to say the least. We've been down here at Ladies Island Marina for, since October 12th. That's when we pulled in last year. And yeah, it's been many, many months of sort of just sitting here and doing the live aboard thing. And you sort of, I don't know, I don't want to say the boat's gotten weaker, but it just always feels better when she's out there, out at sea, and she's still moving around and stuff. To be sitting for so long, you got to expect that as soon as you start making Sparrow move a little bit, she's going to have some creaks and groans and not be too happy in the beginning, but we'll get there. We'll definitely get there. So the mast, and then I'll go and sort of redo the truing of the mast. So I'll go through and make sure she's standing up perfectly straight. All the tensions are pretty good, and everything is looking pretty solid. Because obviously the mast is sort of the biggest one. The scary thing, the nightmare scenarios, you get rolled or the mast comes down, something like that, and you basically lose your propulsion. I mean, with the West Sail, it's a little different mindset, I think, because you lose your mast on a West Sail and you are in one of the world's greatest lifeboats then, and if your engine still works, you got quite a good range. And the biggest thing is that you're not going to sink. These boats are absolute tanks. I mean, they were really designed as pilot vessels and all that sort of stuff. They're off of that. I think it's a Colin Archer design. I could have that wrong. I'm not too up on my old West Sail history, but it's an old Norwegian design, really. The old double ender built like a tank, beamy. Not fast, but boy, is it seaworthy. So get that mast all sorted out, make sure everything's looking good, and sort of go on from there. The next big one, obviously, is the engine, because I want to make sure this engine is going. And it has been a bit of a trial and tribulations dealing with this engine after that trip around the Atlantic, because I probably put a good 400 hours on that engine, and it really, I don't know, I could just tell things were getting a bit iffy with some of the systems in there. One, the oil level was going up, and I couldn't figure out what that was. It wasn't from water, and I eventually, when I got back here, I remember leaving for a couple of weeks during the holidays and then coming back, and I went to go fire up the engine because I typically like to run the engine for a couple hours every week or two just to sort of keep everything lubricated, keep it all moving. And luckily I went and checked the engine oil, and it was 3 times higher than it should be. It was ridiculous, and it smelled of diesel, and I knew I had a serious problem. And that can turn into or it can be brought on by a number of different issues, but the easiest to fix was the lift pump, which basically is just the first line of pumps to be able to pump the fuel into the engine. And I replaced that, and everything seems to be okay. I've run the engine quite a bit since then, and I always check that oil level. But one of the reasons why you always want to check that oil level is if your oil is really, really high, one of the things that can happen, and it's kind of one of the scariest things, is called a runaway. And that's when your engine, basically you can no longer stop it, and it just starts revving up. And the only way to actually prevent that, or to stop it once it's started, is to block the air intake. And so, it's always kind of good to at least have a plan of action on that. So that all of a sudden, if things start going crazy, you can jam something into the air intake, and that'll cease the engine up a little bit. But man, if I would have fired that engine up with that oil that high, I'm sure it would have been a disaster. So I sort of averted that one just by doing the normal routine of checking the oil, checking all that stuff before you fire up the engine. It's definitely worth it. And I think before I definitely had gotten a little bit lax on that, but since that happened, it's one of those things where it sort of taught me that lesson. And so I doubt I will ever be firing this engine up without checking the oil and some of the other fluids. So, but what I like to have, and what I'm accumulating at this point, I like to be able to do 2 oil changes on any passage if I need it. So I need enough oil to do that, which is basically, 2 gallons. I'll probably get one of those 3-gallon jugs or whatever, and that will sort it. Make sure I have oil filters to be able to change those as well. And then I have a few spare fuel filters, change those out. And then alternator belts, change those out. Other than that, I think transmission fluid, coolant, and that's pretty much it. I mean, I've always had a spare alternator on board, and I always have a spare starter on board. Other than that, you can't fill your boat up with every single spare part you need for an engine. You might as well just have a second engine strapped to the deck. There's only so much you can do, and in reality, I can always rely on the sails. That's the biggest thing, and but I want to be able to keep that engine going. And last but not least, I can't even believe I forgot to say it, but the impellers for the keeping it cool, pumping that raw water through, and I think I have about 4 of those on board, leftovers, but unused, ready to go at a moment's notice. I still remember one time when the engine was overheating, pulled the impeller out, and it wasn't missing any rubber blades, but it had a bunch of them that were cracked through, so it wasn't working very well, and I could not find any impellers. And I'm way out to sea. I think I was headed to the Caribbean or something, and oh my gosh, I had to peel through everything. It took me like 2 hours to go through every little place on this boat, and then I found that I had 2 spares on board. But knowing where some of those are and making sure everything, I like to sort of compartmentalize where I store things on this boat now, and that's typically just so it's much easier to remember. Okay, well that cabinet over there houses all the engine stuff. That one houses all the tools. Blah 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 blah. So that's pretty much what I try and do for the engine. And obviously, I'll have full fuel on board. I don't think there's a diesel fuel crisis right now, but it's crazy. I'm in South Carolina, and yeah, the gas stations don't have any gas. It's pretty interesting. You sort of see clips of that stuff on YouTube and whatever, but then to actually be out there in reality and see these, the other day there were just lines of cars trying to get fuel, and then one gas station didn't have any at all. So luckily I don't have a car, so I'm not too worried about that. And I still have more diesel than I can fit into my tanks from this last trip. I'm getting close though. I'm almost to the point where it's just in my 2 35-gallon tanks. So that's pretty good. Checking the batteries, the next one down the line. That's always important, making sure that your battery's water level, depending on which kind of batteries you have, but I've got the old school El Cheapo, basically car batteries. And there's 4 of them for the house and then 1 of them for the engine. But you just go through, you want to make sure everything's sort of clean. There's no big corrosion buildup or anything like that on anything. All the terminals look really good. But mostly it's checking the water level inside of the batteries, making sure it's all topped up. And that way it's going to be able to hold a good charge. The batteries aren't going to hurt themselves, and you're going to be able to power everything because, obviously I've been just plugged into shore power down here. I don't really have to use it much because the 2 solar panels on a sunny day before noon, I'm already basically fully topped up as far as the electricity goes. And I don't know, I've always wanted to see how much power I actually use. It can't be very much because I don't even leave the charger on. I think while I'm here on a dock, maybe $20 worth a month, if that. That's even doubtable because now I don't use a heater at all, and I don't have air conditioning. I think the only thing I actually have plugged in is my computer, and that's about it. But that's not on all the time either. So get the batteries, make sure they're all good, and that's sort of the propulsion stuff. Now, the rest of it is sort of all smaller little things, but that's all the propulsion. Now, I am going to sit down with a buddy of mine before I leave, and he is sort of an expert when it comes to the electrical side of things, and more than anything, I just want to learn how to use a multimeter better so that when I do have electrical sort of issues on the boat, I can figure out and troubleshoot them a lot better. So there's still a lot of things that I need to learn about all these systems. And I do have the big book, the boat owner's mechanical and electrical guide and all that sort of stuff. But that can only go so far compared to, sitting down with somebody who really knows what they're doing and showing you exactly what's going on. So I still have a few lessons to learn there. We're going to actually trade services because they just got a sail right, and I know how to use one of those. So I'm going to sort of show them a few tricks that I've learned over the years sewing sails, and they're going to show me how to use this multimeter properly. Because right now the only thing I can tell is if something is live or if it's not. I want to learn how connectivity and all that sort of stuff. So should be pretty cool. The next system obviously is going to be the propane, because I want to be able to fry up those fish when I rake them in, and also be able to just cook other food and stuff. Now I still have my two systems where I typically just boil water with the little jet boil camping stove. So for any coffee, tea, dehydrated meals, things like that, I'm always going to just use that because it's quick, it's hyper efficient, and you can measure out how much water you're boiling much more efficient than we're just pouring it into a kettle. But I want to make sure that my propane stash is all looking good, so I'll probably end up switching out the big sort of normal size, what you would see on somebody's gas grill or something like that. I have one of those, and then I have 3 smaller ones, and the smaller ones are all full, but I kind of want to keep those full and just keep replacing the larger one. Eventually I need to replace all of them, because 2 of those are not originals of the boat, but they were on the boat and they were made in 1980, 82, something like that. So they are, they're almost 50 years old, or almost 40 years old. So I have a lot of trouble finding places that will actually fill them, even though they're pretty heavy duty. They're the type that are made out of aluminum, like heavy duty aluminum. But still, in the Caribbean, you can get them filled up. They don't care down there. But up here in the States, you got to find a willing and able person, but they also have to be inspected and stuff like that. That's one of the reasons I really like the Caribbean. It's just not a lot of rules and regulations like they have up here. I'm drinking my lemon water. Delicious. Hot water with a slice of lemon. Making sure I don't get any of those kidney stones. Or at least that's what people tell me. So propane, yeah, everything else seems to be okay with the propane. I'm going to be using the oven quite a bit on this trip because I've recently switched over from eating normal pizza from Pizza Hut or all those other places to making cauliflower pizzas, trying to do a little substitute because I don't know if I've talked about this, but normally before these big trips, and definitely on the last one, I try and gain about 15 to 20 pounds just to be able to make sure that if I ever get really low on food and have to ration again, I've got a good little base weight to work off of. Seeing myself in the Falkland Islands that time was scary, and I hope to never see that again. But so I gain all this weight, I go out to sea on what's supposed to be like a year-long trip, and it ends up just being in the Atlantic. So I'm on there, I'm eating all the good stuff like I always do, all the kind bars and all that sort of stuff. So I kept the weight on, and then I got back to land after 88 days, and I had missed all these things like pizza and burgers and all that, and so I just kept eating, and COVID was still going on. So I was like, oh my gosh, comfort me, food. And so basically I went and just kept all the weight on. But over the last 2 months, I was finally able to buckle down a little bit and switched up. I've always done a little bit of exercise and stuff, but I had to sort of make sure that was more of a daily routine. But the biggest thing was the food. I needed to sort of cut down on some of that stuff that I was eating. So switched over to a lot lot of other more healthy sort of plant-based stuff and just protein. But anyway, going down a rabbit hole here. I'm gonna definitely be making a lot more food like cauliflower pizza and stuff like that, and hopefully make my own bread and everything on this trip. So I'll be using the oven a lot more. That's my point, is instead of just boiling water and eating, MREs and all that sort of stuff, I'm going to try and actually do some quality cooking while I'm out there on the ocean this time. So I will be using that oven, which uses a lot more of the propane. That's why I want to make sure I have enough propane. You can go down a rabbit hole pretty quick here. Let's see. Fishing supplies. Yes, that one. I wanted to make sure I've got enough lures, and it's really basic on this boat. I just have a hand line, which is just a fishing line, pretty heavy duty. I want to say I've got 50-pound test line, which is pretty heavy duty, but then I think I also have like some 150, and I don't even know why I have that, but I think it was just because I know it'll last a lot longer. But mostly it's having all the swivels and, maybe 5-6 different lures. I can always make lures, so I have a lot of like hooks and stuff, but just wanted to peel through and make sure I had all that gear, because I definitely am looking forward to some mahi-mahi out there. And actually, if I get into it, I'd love to get some more flying fish. I got to look into how to, because flying fish, usually it's only one or two, and they're pretty small, so it's like a little snack. But I'm going to look at some recipes for flying fish, because if I get any of those lucky breaks where you go through a big mess of them and you end up with 5 or 6 decent sized ones on the deck, I'd love to have a full-on flying fish meal. So as far as fishing gear goes, I'm pretty stocked up. And I always do, little side note, I always do keep a little bit of fishing tackle in my grab bag, sort of the emergency grab bag, just because, when I read Stephen Callahan's book, Adrift, where he's out, living in a life raft for 73 days or whatever, I mean, geez, if he wasn't able to fish, it would have been really, really bad. So I always try and put myself in that worst case scenario and think about what would help and what would be sort of nice in that situation. And one of those things would be fishing line. So that's fishing supplies. And I guess that should bleed over into the safety gear. And Sparrow, oh geez, how do I say this? She's half and half set on that. And let me explain. The grab bag has a couple of first aid kits. She's got, I think some of the most important things in there is I have a neck brace in case something goes and I get like a crick in my neck or something like that. Because I remember on one of my first solo voyages down in the Caribbean from, I believe, St. Lucia back to the BVI, I fell asleep in the cockpit, and I fell asleep sitting up, and basically my head dropped. And when I woke up, my neck hurt so bad. And it proceeded to hurt for, I want to say, like a year or so. And one of the things that I really wished I would have had was some sort of like neck brace. So at least when I'm lying down or whatever, I'm sort of, my neck is immobilized a little bit, because I've had that happen too, where I just sleep wrong on it, and then all of a sudden you wake up and your neck hurts. And sailing, you're always looking up at the sails. You got to move around. And the biggest thing is the pain. If you've ever had severe neck pain, all you want to do is just lie down. You don't want to move. Everything hurts. Every movement hurts. But when you're sailing, you have to deal with things up on deck, the sails, all that sort of stuff. And a neck brace definitely is, I think, an overlooked item in many people's grab bags, or just on their boats in general. So top tip from old J-Rum, get that neck brace. They're not expensive. You can get all sorts of different ones. Doesn't have to be anything crazy. But inside of there, so I've got first aid kit. I always keep some sunscreen. I keep some toothpaste, toothbrush, sunglasses. Basically, almost like a mini catalog of things that I would want to have if I was in my life raft. And so just little amenities, not much. There's always a little bit of food in there. I don't really keep water in there per se, because I know the life raft has, I think, 6 liters of water in it, and I typically have water jugs that if everything comes down to it, I'd grab that grab bag and I'd grab a 5-gallon jug of water, sort of thing. But I do keep my desalinator pump in the grab bag, and so I can make the water if I need to. Although, don't ever trust those things. They've failed me before, but still got to have one on board. And then obviously all the safety stuff, the sound signals. I usually have 2 of those, and then I've got a plethora of flares, and I do have all the Coast Guard regulation flares. The red handhelds, the parachutes, the orange smoke. I think I even have a green dye. And then I also have the EPIRB as well. And I checked the EPIRB yesterday, made sure the battery was good, and also did the expiration, or checked the expiration. So it expires at the end of 2021. So I'm still pretty much in the green zone when it comes to that, but it is towards the tail end of it. So that's a little disconcerting, but at this point, I should be okay. I'm not too worried about it. I know that when they do those expiration dates, they have to be pretty conservative. So the other one, though, and this is why it's sort of a 50-50 thing, is the actual life raft. So I have a 6-person life raft, and it expired in 2019, and I went to inquire about getting it serviced and checked, because typically, life raft is like $3,000 to $5,000, and what you do is when it gets close to expiring, then you go ahead and you send it in or drop it off at a place that's certified to service them, and then they can slap a new sticker on there saying this one's good. I don't know if I just bought the wrong one or what, but I called around to a bunch of places near Charleston and stuff like that, and everybody said, nah, you might as well just go buy another one. We sell these. And I was like, holy cow. Okay. So usually I think it's between $500 and $800 to service a life raft, and a new one's going to cost $3,000 to $5,000. And I'm thinking to myself, great, I don't have any money for that. Not a possibility. So I'm going to do something very foolish and that I don't recommend for anybody. And that is to just hope and pray that life raft is going to work just fine out there. And that's what I'm going to do, because I don't have any money to buy a new one. And I wouldn't want to purchase a whole new setup right now, because I don't know what's going to be the future of me and this boat and all that sort of stuff. I'm gonna have to see what happens with the old solo sailing career and everything. That last trip really was a big punch in the stomach, so to speak. And I think this next trip is going to be sort of the litmus test of, am I still enjoying being out there by myself and doing the stuff that I've done for years, or is it time to move on to something else? So we shall see. I'm not going to get too much into that right now, but oh boy. So yeah, I mean, the grab bag, it's just got pretty much anything and everything I would need for rescue, signaling, injuries, a little bit of food, making water, and then things that people don't think of, like sunscreen and toothpaste and sunglasses and all that sort of stuff. I mean, that stuff comes in pretty handy. And I also do, now that they have those nice long sleeve UV protectant shirts, I've got one of those in there just in case, because you never know. I mean, things go terribly wrong. All of a sudden, boat's filling with water. It's the middle of the night. you've got the life raft already deployed. The boat is sinking faster than you ever thought possible, and you don't have time to go through and start being like, oh, should I take that? Should I grab that? No, it's you've got time to grab one thing, get into the cockpit, and get into the life raft. That's the situation you want to make sure you're in. And I always keep the grab bag in the exact same spot. It's exposed. It's not packed away anywhere. All I have to do is undo one little slip knot that's on a bungee, and that sucker comes right out and sling it around my shoulder, and I go. So that's at least the plan or the thinking behind it. Hopefully I never have to find out exactly what that how that plan works, but got to be ready for it. The next job I have to do after sitting here for six or 7 months is clean the bottom. And it's one of those things where I'm very fortunate to have good friends down here, and one of them owns a bottom cleaning company. They let me use their hookah, and I can go down there and clean it all up. But that's one, it's interesting. The growth down here typically isn't barnacles. It's this beardy, algae-looking stuff. And last year when I cleaned it, it was easy to get off. It's just a scraper. There's no scrubbing, none of that. I mean, you just go down there and it just flakes off. No big deal. I did have the thinking that if I was actually moving, it would probably all come off, but that's not something that I want to test and just say, well, I'll just go out there. And, the first time I'm pushing through water, it's all going to just come off. Nah, it's not a smart idea. So I've got to clean all that up, but that only takes a couple hours. And like I said, I can use the guy's hookah, and that works out really, really well. But I won't do that until literally 3 days, maybe 2 days before departure. Because in this river, I mean, that stuff grows fast. It's crazy. If I did it right now and I left 2 weeks from now, I'd already have a layer of growth on there. And I want Sparrow to be pushing water really easy, really fast. Nothing slows the boat down quite like a bunch of growth on the bottom. So got to take care of that. I've already sorted out all the tools. That's one of the things that I like to do before any trip is pull out all the hand tools, pull out all the power tools, pretty much anything and everything. Go through, organize the power tools, make sure obviously that all the batteries that I have are all fully charged before I take off, because I don't know, I can charge them with the inverter, but they definitely take a little bit of juice to do that. So I also keep a pretty good stock of those little 18-volt batteries. So that typically is all good. But with the hand tools, I just really want to organize them, hit them up with some WD-40, pack them away, and make sure, that I have all the little things I need. Because it's amazing how tools just sort of disappear, then reappear, then disappear, and doing a good thorough check over on all those just sort of makes sense, and it helps give me a little bit of confidence that yes, I will be able to fix pretty much any problem I come across while I'm out there. So those are all pretty much sorted. I've already done that. I do have to, and I think I'm actually going to do it later today because it's kind of cold. It's supposed to be rainy for the next day or so, but I need to service all the winches. I went around yesterday and spun them all, and even though they spin relatively easily, they don't spin like clockwork, and I have had to, I've had to fix, or at least just go through and clean winches out at sea when the boat is moving, and it's not fun because you really have to be locked in and being able to do it when the boat's not moving at all. Again, it's just one of those things. It's 1,000 times easier to do that here on land rather than out at sea. So I figure it's going to take, that's about a 4 to 6 hour project because I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I have 11 winches on board, but luckily they're all super low-tech, old-school winches, so they are not complicated, but I like to get in there, a little diesel fuel, clean them all up, lube them as little as possible, put them back on, and there is not many joys that can compare to taking a winch that barely moves and then putting it back together, and it spins and it makes a perfect sound. I absolutely love it. So going to take care of all the winches, make sure that's all good, and obviously inspect all the lines. It's interesting. With all these lines, I have put 50, 60,000 miles, something like that, on all these lines, and they all seem to be doing pretty good. I still have spare line from the big trip in 2017 and 18. I just feel like this stuff is still really in good shape. But I've got the spares, and I have had to go through and I cut all the splicing. So when I first got all these lines for my halyards and my sheets, I went and did, I was so excited. I wanted to really make this boat look good and all seaworthy and all that stuff. So I went around and I spliced them all. I whipped them, spent hours doing it, but it was a delight. It was fun. And I think I had to cut the final splice off to get rid of some chafe just a couple weeks ago, and that was on the main sheet. And now I look around the boat, and I only use Bohlins. And now I'm really kind of in that mode of a Bohlin is far more functional because you can untie it. You're going to lose less line if you need to shorten it or do anything like that. When you splice something together, it's permanent. And if you need to shorten that line or switch it up, it's not as convenient or easy. And I think it's one thing if you are sailing, normal sailing routes and things like that. But when you're spending exorbitant amount of time offshore and out at sea, you're always looking at function over, I don't know what the right word is, but a splice looks beautiful, but a Bohlin works better, as far as I'm concerned, for making changes to that line, where that line is, how long that line is, things like that. So, because one of the ideas that I've always had is that you get chafe in areas where lines are sitting at the exact same spot on a rub point, whether it be a block or something like that. And so every few weeks or month or so, if you switch it up 6 inches or a foot in one direction, then all of a sudden you're moving that little pressure point. And that's just a way to avoid having to replace lines and save a little cash, I guess. So anyway, go through all the lines, but they're all looking pretty good. I do need to replace Mongo's lines. Man, sad story. Old Mongo took a big hit. I had a boat leaving the marina, I guess a week ago, and I don't know what I was thinking. It was pretty dumb on my part. I was headed to. It was really early in the morning, and I was headed in, go take a shower. See these guys getting ready to leave from the pier next to mine, and I'm not thinking too much of it. Perfectly calm morning, nothing. And instead of standing there and waiting, and there is a reason why I didn't stand there and wait. It's because the bugs down here have been horrific. I mean, we're talking you just get swarmed, and they're those no-see-ums, so they're biting you. They leave huge welts on me. I think I react to them pretty bad. But so in any event, I just head in. I'm like, it'll be fine. And then, 30 minutes later, I'm coming back out, and as around the corner, I look over, and the boat is pinned up against, there's like 8 people, and it's pinned up against Mongo. So it basically beam on to Sparrow, and the tidal current is just keeping her right on. And it hit the lower hydro blade and smashed that to the side, and it actually did some damage there. And I had to go through and tune up the whole mechanism, make sure everything looks good. It definitely did some scratches and things like that. And so I don't know. It's one of those worries where it's impossible to test out Mongo until I'm out there sailing, and I won't really know I mean, as far as I can see, and Mongo's a very simple old gent out there. So as far as I can see, everything is ship shape on it. I have to use my spare hydro blade, and I'll get the other one fixed when I'm up in Maine. But I don't know. It's just one of those things. It was not exactly what I wanted, and the worst part was I mean, Mongo can take a definite hit for sure, and it did. But honestly, my first thought, because I just believe Sparrow is such a strong boat, my first thought was, oh no, I'm going to have to stand here while these guys deal with this, and the bugs are going to eat me alive. I had no concern over, oh my gosh, did they do any damage? So, but in any event, I need to replace the little lines for Mongo, but other than that, he's looking great, and only time will really tell if that actually goes through or not, but we'll see. And and I've got enough wind blades, and I suppose I could still use the damaged hydro blade. But other than that, it's just having oil to drip over it every single morning. That's basically me feeding Mongo, but. So Mongo's all good, and all the lines are good, and I got the spare stuff. And I've also got tons of spare wires. So for the shrouds, forestay, backstay, I could replace any of those. I couldn't replace all of them in one shot, but I could replace enough where I feel pretty confident out there. So that's pretty good. I ordered my chart because I actually gave away my chart of the East Coast to my last crew member as sort of a keepsake. It was getting pretty old. It was marked up. There must have been 10 trips on there, and it was getting a little rough. So I'm looking forward to having my new chart because I definitely love being able to chart my position. I'm not much of a computer screen guy, and I'd much rather be using the sextant and keeping track that way. I always have the GPS feed so that I can check my sites and stuff like that. But it's one of those things where I like the old school route, and so I need to make sure I have all the charts that I want. And really, that's just for me. That's going to be charts of the Cape Hatteras region, so that if I have to duck in there, I know where I'm going, and then also the Gulf of Maine, Georges Bank, but then just the overall chart of the entire East Coast from Florida all the way up to, I guess it goes all the way to Nova Scotia. So I have that coming, and I still have to set up the old, this is the last big sort of system, I guess, is weather routing and downloading, and communications. So I need to go on and make sure the old Garmin InReach, I think you can get it you can just pay for 1 month without having to subscribe to it, but I don't know. It's sort of a fishy thing. They want you to do the subscriptions, and then when you cancel it, then there's a fee. I have to check. They're always updating that sort of stuff, but for this one, I really just I'd like to buy 1 month of service to be able to text all I want while I'm out there, check in with my parents, family, friends, all that sort of stuff. This is pretty fun. I really enjoy being able to do that. Even as a solo sailor, it just, I don't know, if I'm having like cocktail hour or something like that, it's kind of cool just to text back and forth, especially on these short trips. I don't know, it's kind of neat. And then the sat phone, I checked that. It has 75 minutes left on it, which I think that should be good for. I mean, I'm only looking at having to download the weather maybe twice while I'm out there, if that. So plenty of minutes on there. But boy, that sat phone is on its last leg. It is in rough shape. I'd like to purchase a new one, but at this point, it's just not feasible. So I'm going to get up there, and once I know what the future is as far as sailing goes, then I'll deal with that. But I think she's got one last trip, and like I said, it's only 2 downloads or so that I need once I'm out there, and and we'll go from there. But I've already tested the sat phone. It does work, and I can, get it going and stuff. So that's sort of my comms. And yeah, I mean, I don't really have any weather routing people. Like, I don't pay for a service or anything like that. But I do have, my younger brother, and then I've got my other buddy Scott, who they like to dabble in the weather, and they'll give me little updates, which again is why I really like to have that inReach going. So if they see something, or Mike Porter, if he sees something, he'll definitely reach out. And it's also cool where if something really drastic changes or happens out there, I can text those guys and they will reach back out because they can see all of it in real time. And it's kind of funny because I'm seeing it in real life. They see it in real time, but they can actually see what's coming up, and that's where I'm in the dark a lot of times outside of my barometer, basically. So that's sort of the weather routing systems and all that. Then I have all sort of the last minute stuff, which is topping up the water tanks and then also the jerry can. So I can hold 70 gallons in my 2 main tanks, but then I like to have, at least for this trip, I like to have probably another 15 gallons or so of fresh water on board. And that gives me, a huge amount. I mean, I can even do like a 1 gallon shower each evening and stuff like that. So that should be plenty for this trip. So I don't have to go too far overboard with that. But I do always like to keep those jerry cans because you never know if something is going to go a bit awry in those water tanks. I've always had that fear of, ever since, catching water off the coast of Africa and seeing that bacteria form. It's truly amazing how fast water can go from sweet to completely sour and disgusting. And if that happens to, half of your fresh water supply, you're looking at a bunch of unusable fresh water, and it's not very good. And I don't like to have to put any bleach in there. I mean, I do on occasion. I would put like maybe 1 drop for 30 gallons. But even that 1 drop, you can now taste it. And I don't know, it definitely affects the taste of the coffee and all that sort of stuff. But I switch out I have 1 filter for the water tanks. And then I also purchased another filter that screws onto the end of the hose. So when I fill the water, it's going through a filter. And then when the water goes to the sink, it goes through 1 more filter. And then I typically will have my little household water filter as well, that I like, a pitcher. So I'll put it in there and I fill that up. And that one, I think all that really does is make sure it tastes good, because these tanks are all plastic and you get that plasticky old boat tank taste that's not great. So other than that, that's pretty much the whole water system. And I'll probably do maybe 2 or 3 just gallon jugs. And one of the things I like to do, which helps, oddly enough, the electricity usage, is I will go and I'll take maybe 3 gallon jugs of water, and I'll actually go and freeze those, a couple of days before the trip, so they're absolutely rock solid, bursting at the seams, so to speak. And I will put those in the bottom of my fridge. And it's surprising. Then I can turn my fridge down from 10, turn it down to like 5, and it's going to keep everything cold. And those things will still have ice in them 3-4 days down the line. My fridge is not the best insulated, I don't think. I've never taken all the paneling apart and all that to see just how much insulation is really in there. But when I'm running full till on that, to keep, meats and things like that frozen, then it is sucking the juice out of the batteries. And, it's not a huge deal because I can run the engine, but I like the solar panels, when they're having a big draw on them, the solar panels are having trouble keeping up with that, unless it's, super sunny and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, so I like to freeze some water, keep that in there, help the fridge. And then I'll also freeze, the meats and things like that if I end up bringing some of those. Typically, I like to bring some ham and turkey and bacon and stuff. I haven't had bacon in so long. Oh my gosh, I can't wait. When I go out to sea, I'm definitely bringing 2 pounds with me because I love my fry-ups out there. So that should be pretty good. And then, yeah, it's pretty much making a nice grocery list. Again, this one's going to be a little different. Normally, I don't know. I just was eating sort of crummy food, I guess. I still have 8 months or so of dehydrated emergency prepper sort of long life food. I only have 2 months worth on the boat because I took the rest of it off of the boat, put it in my parents' place. But I have those on board, and I'll always keep a couple of those just in case. You never know. It'd be nice to just be able to get out of here and go and stay out in the sea for a couple months at a moment's notice. I'm not much of a doomsday prepper, but I figure if you got a boat, there's no reason not to. So I have a couple months worth of that food, but I don't plan on touching that with a 10-foot pole unless absolutely needed because it's not great. But yeah, basically get that food, load everything, stow everything, and then switch out of dock mode and put her into offshore mode. And that's really just pulling out sailbags, putting those in the forepeak, moving my bunk back into midships, putting in the leeboard, making sure everything is strapped down and stowed in its proper position and not going to go flying anywhere. And other than that, then it's pretty much just waiting and watching for a good weather window. And that's already begun. I start doing that typically in April because I like to just watch the weekly pattern of systems, again, coming down from Canada, going across the States, and then ripping off a Hatteras and turning into these gales, because that's basically how it happens. And it goes from doing that every couple of days to once a week to hopefully less than that. But again, I had such good weather for the trip last year that I am expecting this one to not be good weather. And I don't think anything will compare with my trip from Rockland down to Charleston a couple years ago, where I ended up east of Bermuda in a 3-day gale, hove to, just waiting for the winds to shift. That was pretty annoying. It wasn't scary by any means because the winds were coming out of the southwest, but it was just annoying. The winds were so strong, and I couldn't do anything but lose ground very slowly and try and avoid the really, really heavy winds that were to the west of me. So that's basically me in a nutshell at this point. So I've done a bunch of varnish work. I'm putting things back together. I've got a few projects, and each day I just take a look at this list and try and cross another thing off. And that's what's going on. I have a couple of weeks. I'm paid up at the old marina until the end of the month. So if I can get out of here June 1st, then I owe no man, no money, and I am a happy guy. And then I can head out to sea. So fingers crossed that I get a good weather window. My goal is to have the boat 100% ready, barring the food. So boat is 100% ready. All I would need to do is top up the water and then go to the grocery store. That's when I'd like to have that by May 20th. And then, as I see a window possibly coming, that's when I'll clean the bottom of the boat. And then if it comes through, I'm out of here. Like I said, I try and ride sort of the tail end of a system going out, catch some southerlies, go into the Gulf Stream, get out of that after a couple of days, and then head for Cape Cod. So bounce through. I don't know. I wonder if I'll go outside of George's Bank or inside. Outside of George's, there's less traffic, less fishing boats. inside of George's, which is the way I've gone almost every time just because of the weather. I'm always ducking and dodging. You get in all the fog. There's tons of boats. I don't know. It's kind of an annoying little place, but it's a little shorter. And a lot of people will say, well, why don't you go through the Cape Cod Canal? And again, it's just, to get to the Cape Cod Canal for a solo sailor, you're talking being awake for 24 hours or so, dealing with all the fishing and all the shipping traffic. Then you get through the canal. You got to time it right with the tides. You get past that, and now you're in, the Gulf of Maine, but you're still in all the fishing and stuff and all the traffic from Boston. I don't know. For me, that just is a nightmare. Give me open ocean, blue water. That's what I'm sort of looking for. So, hope you guys enjoyed the episode. That's pretty much it. There's probably about 150 other things that I can think of that I should talk about, but that's sort of my basic list. And I guess the last thing I'll say is I always keep this notepad with this list open and on the table with a pen on it, because I'm either crossing stuff off or I'm adding to it. And that is probably one of the most essential things you can have, is just a list of what you need and all that and what you have to do, because it's way too easy to overlook stuff. And all of a sudden you remember something in the middle of the night, you get up and you write it down, and then you will never forget it because you got a hard copy. But other than that, I'm hoping to pin a couple of people down before I go north for a few more interviews, because there are some really interesting men and women down here that have some pretty incredible stories that hopefully they will be willing to share. And then I do have a few more of the Appalachian Trail stories and states coming up, but those I'm writing this book about that trip, and I am still in Virginia, and I'm having trouble because I'm sort of getting discombobulated between the podcast story and the book story and them coming together, and there's just a lot of stuff going on with me taking off to go north and everything. So be patient, but there's at least like 3 or 4 more coming up, because that's where the AT stories get pretty cool. Once you get past New England and then get back into the rough and rugged mountains of the Green Mountains, the White Mountains, and then up into Maine. So we're getting there. But other than that, thanks for listening, and till next time. Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening. And if you enjoy the podcast and want to support it, just go to podbean.com and you can become a patron and keep the show on the air. Also, if you like the music at the beginning, the album is called Deep Teal, and the artist is Adrian Edson. It's available on Amazon Music. And if you want the full story of the trip around the world, the book, the Kindle book, and the audiobook can all be found on Amazon.com. Sailing into Oblivion, the solo nonstop voyage of the mighty Sparrow. Fair winds and following seas.